Okay, so back at 30 frames per second as opposed to 15, which I was using before accidentally. Not a big deal. So now we're going to do the rotation, the character rotation. And what's going to happen is we're going to create a separate script. We can mash it all into one script, the rotation as well as the movement. But it's going to make a messy script. It's going to be more difficult to structure in a non-glitchy way. So here we have a 36-line script that works perfectly fine. So it's perfect, right? We don't need to make it any more complicated. If you divide it into, you don't want to have too many scripts that you can't even manage them, but you want to have a different script for different scripts for different things so that you don't create a mess of a script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second using templates, a second game logic simple, and I'm going to call this player rotation, or player, yeah, rotation is fine, .py. Remove the useless things, and well, we're going to call this, whoops, select the own, or remove the own, and I'm going to call it player. Call it whatever you want. I want to call it player because it's going to represent this player mesh here. And we're going to add the sensor for it, the always sensor, and the Python controller, link them, and we're going to set it to player rotation because that's its script. And now what this is going to do is we're going to pick up the same movement, right? The keyboard with priorities, of course, using Python's if statements. So the same thing here. We can actually go ahead and just copy everything. So I'm copying the keyboard equals BGE logic keyboard as well as the buttons that I've set. I'm going to go to the script here and paste them. So it's already there. Now the next thing is we want to have an actuator that will set the player's where the player is pointing. So an edit object, and you may be familiar with this, you may not, so you're going to learn about it now if you're new to it. The edit object has different functions. So here's add object if you want to spawn, say, a bullet or spawn an enemy even. End object to delete an object from the scene. Replace mesh to change the mesh of an object if you want to change something's shape. What we want though, and there's dynamics for restore dynamics, disable rigid body, enable rigid body, suspend dynamics, whatever, set mass. What we want is the track to. And what it does is it basically makes the object that we're applying the logic to, in this case the actuator is on the player object, it makes it point towards whatever object we specify. So if we want it to track to the point forward, we just specify it to track to point forward. Now the 3D, the time here is how long you want it to track to before it stops following the object. We don't want to set a time to it. 0 means it's going to keep tracking as long as whatever condition you set applies. 3D is in case you have different heights. In this case we don't have a height difference, so we don't want 3D to be selected. But let's say you have this floating ghost enemy, for example, that's following the player. You want it to be set to 3D so that no matter where the player is, it's going to point towards him. In this case, it's going to point to where, let's say we move this forward, we move this up, I'm sorry. Without 3D, it's going to point to its direction. So it's not going to be pointing anywhere else. It's going to be pointing forward towards it, but it's not going to look on an angle up at it, right? But with 3D, it will. I'm not going to show you how this works. You can experiment with it if you want. I don't want to. For those of you who aren't interested, I don't want to waste your time, but we're just going to add the necessary controllers here. So this is going to be point forward because it'll make the player look forward. And then we're going to add, let's add 4 more first of all. 3 more, I'm sorry. For the main directions that the player is going to be pointing at. Point back. And this is going to, whoops, not add object. Remember to set it to track to. And point back. And we can just contract these, no problem. Point right. Track to. Point right. And I'm going to contract this. Point left. And notice I'm matching the names of the empties. That's just to make it easier to know which one points towards which object. Track to, always remember that. Point left. Okay, so now we have our 4 basic directions set up. Now we want to set the secondary directions, the secondary axes, which are a combination of Y and X and whatever. So we're going to go back to selecting our player and add four edit object actuators. Connect the first one, point forward underscore right, because that's what I called it, track 2, point forward right. Connect the next one, point forward left, whoops, track 2, point forward left. Next up, point back right, and it's a bit redundant, but some things you have to do. Point back right, and finally point back left. Of course, we got to set it to track 2 first of all. Point back, whoops, got to get the caps right, left. There we go. Okay, so now we have everything set up. Now what we need to do, of course, it exists, it's connected to the script, but the script doesn't recognize them as existing. So we're going to have to add them. If you watched my at using sensors and actuators in Python, you're going to know how this works. So I'm just going to add the sensors over here, put a comment, say, actually it's going to be actuators, so actuators, and the comment of course doesn't make a difference in Python, just a divider here. It's just there for reference. When you look at it, you know what you're going to be looking at. So now we're going to add the all 8 actuators that we just added. So the first one is going to be point forward, and it's going to be cont actuators to get an actuator, square brackets, the quotation marks, and then point forward. And now I'm going to duplicate this 4 times. Make sure you select it all. Duplicate it 3 times to create 4 instances. Point back, point right, and point left. And then we're going to have to change it appropriately. Here you can just copy these since they're the same. Paste. Yeah, you want to have the P in there too. So you want to make sure that the spelling is completely accurate, or else you're going to get an error. And then the point left. Okay, so now we have these 4 incorporated into our script. Now we want to have the other 4, the forward right, forward left, and we're going to have to make sure we change them, of course, to make sure that they fit right. So here, point back right. I'm going to keep this left. I'm just going to do a point back and then underscore left. Forward right, forward left, back, back right, sorry. You want to make sure that of course the name here matches this one so you don't have any confusion. And point back left. So now we're just going to check point forward, forward, back, back, right, right, left, left. We're going to get an error if something, or we're going to see that something is weird, but it's always good to check. So forward, right, forward, left, back, right, back, left, back, right, back, left. Perfect. So now now our script knows what these things do. So now we're able to use them in our script, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to set up our if statements. So if. Now here's how the priority order is going to work. Or actually, let's... Okay, hold on.